Am I going to do email marketing? Am I going to do social media? Am I going to do videos? Am I going to do podcasts? What am I going to do to connect with that audience?
Thank you for joining us on the Free Time Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Robert Gaines. After years of songwriting, Aisha de Frietas had thousands of fragmented notes that were refined to become her book, Can't Read Me. She discusses the motivation behind and disciplined practice of her writing. Her strong grasp of marketing makes her unique among fellow creatives. Aisha publishes her music and written work under a pseudonym, aka Girl. But she joins us on camera for a Free Time Mastermind exclusive interview.
Let's get right into it. So, of course,
Okay.
I had talked to several authors about coming on, so I'm very excited to have you on to talk about your book. And of course, primarily, we're talking about Can't Read Me. And and I got the impression from you that you've probably been writing for a very, very long time. Can you start us off when you first started putting pen to paper and collecting ideas?
So sure, I first started out around 4 years ago, and this was really when I got into writing lyrics, when I got into songwriting. And I was inspired just by going through my emotions. It was a cathartic process for me. So whenever I'd come home and say I had, something went on with my friends, or I was talking to my family and I got this spark of inspiration, I'd go to my notebook and I'd write it down. And it wasn't until later on, as I progressed, the more I started writing, I thought, this doesn't seem like it's paragraph writing. It's not a story. It's not poetry exactly, but it was lyrics because I could hear the melodies in my head when I wrote them down. So whenever I write a poem or I write a song, I don't just start by writing it on a piece of paper. Usually I start humming and then the words just flow to me, and then that becomes a story, and then I build on it. I do go back and I revise my first draft where I replace certain words that might not be a perfect fit. So maybe it has too many syllables, maybe it's not the correct sound. I usually pay attention to consonants, assonants, and rhymes. And so I go back, I use this tool called Rhyme Zone, and a lot of writers are familiar with it, especially poets and lyricists, because basically it allows you to sort words by their sound as opposed to their meanings. And this is especially helpful when you're writing poetry and you're thinking about that meter, because you can say words with 2 syllables, words with 3 syllables, words that start with like a "m" sound or have that A, that O vowel, and you refer back to that when you're writing your lyrics. I would suggest for writers, once they're starting out writing, to let everything flow first, because it's supposed to be a relieving, freeing process. So don't interrupt your process by saying, oh, this word doesn't sound right, I'm going to fix this. Hold on to that perfectionism until the end and allow yourself to create a brainstorm, to create a brainweb. If you look back at any of my notebook pages, you'll realize that there's notes at one side of the page, like it's scribbles here, scribbles here, scribbles here. It's like this hot mess. And afterwards, I go back and I'm like, maybe this phrase here is what I'm going to keep for my song, or maybe this is a phrase that I'm going to put into my poetry book. So my poetry book, Can't Read Me, was just this collection of voice notes and notes that I had written down in my phone, where I said, I'm going to turn this into a song in the future. And then I went back and I thought, you know what, maybe this part here, it doesn't make sense, I'm going to discard that. And then I thought, but this here is a golden nugget. And that's what I like to refer to the parts of my songs or the lyrics that I believe people could relate to, or have a good metaphor, have a good symbolism, or are symbolic of something in my life. And I just keep those and put them into my poetry book. And so when I was writing my poetry book, I actually went back through around 2,000 notes. And I looked through them all and I said, you know what? I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. And I said, I'm going to keep this part. I'm going to keep this part and I'm going to add it to my book. And yeah, that's basically how it all started out.
It sounds like you had an analog process where maybe it was pen and ink or
Mhm.
pencil or in on paper, and then you moved to voice notes. Now, I assume we're talking about like voice memo on an iPhone, or do you use a different app specifically for ideas?
So, yes, I do use a combination of both of those things. So, I do love the physical touch of a piece of paper and a pen because I just feel as though I am a creative. I'm in the moment, I'm tapping into that creative part of me. But obviously, it's not convenient, it's not ideal, especially if you're going out for a walk or maybe you're on the bus or maybe you're talking to a friend, then your phone is the most accessible thing. It's right there and you just open up that notes app, especially if you're in a public place and you're like, I don't want to be some weirdo singing into my phone. I don't want to be that person in the corner who's just mumbling to herself. And for that, you can just type a lyric up. And usually, when I look back at lyrics, I remember the melodies I attached to them. So I can see a lyric, and it depends how good that lyric is because some lyrics don't stay in my mind, especially the melodies attached to them. So if I go back and I look at the lyrics, just the words, I can think, oh, I was mumbling this when I said that, and that was kind of the melody where it was. And then I can go back, take it home, and start record that so I have it and I don't have to keep it in my mind. And so, yes, there's this actual psychological concept of open loops and closed loops. And so when you have this open loop, you tend to dwell on that piece of maybe it's a lyric. So if you write a lyric and then you're like, okay, I'll save it for later, I'll put it aside, then if you're subconsciously thinking about it in your mind, and then when you come back to it, you seem to have more ideas. And that's what I've noticed has worked for me with my songwriting because if I'm doing it and I'm busy, I put it aside. Then when I come back, I realize, oh, I've got an entire verse for this. I've got the chorus, I've got the bridge and the song just comes together.
I would think it would be so with you having a melody. So you might have, for the people out there that may have some musical background.
Hmm.
Of course, there's a key that
Yes.
something's going to be in, and then maybe the particular notes or chord
Hmm.
structure, and which is going to form the melody. The tough part that I'm thinking is when you're jotting an idea down, obviously you're remembering maybe the key or the melody,
Hmm.
but that would be a struggle for a lot of people because it's easier when you're able to hum it or sing it the lyrics as it's going to be in the microphone,
Yes.
but that's not always an option. So how do you ever put in the key of and then write the idea down, or is your memory just strong enough where you can go back and look at that on the page and you hear it again? Because I don't think a lot of people can do that. That's quite a skill.
Yeah, so I usually just see it on the page and I can hear it again just because I've done it so often that I can hear those melodies. And if I need, I'll go to a keyboard and I'll just start plucking the notes and find where it is on the scale.
Mhm.
And then, especially when it comes to the recording process, because you can always change the key of the song if you
So
need to. So, if you realize that, hey, maybe B minor's not working for me, for example, then you change it up a key, you pitch it up, you pitch it down, you work with it, see where it sits in your voice. And because in the end, you want the best recording possible, the best vocal performance. That's going to help the listener connect to the song. There's this theory in music where the melody draws you in, but the lyrics keep you there to stay. And so the melody is the first thing that's perceived psychologically because our brain will think of the melody first. So it's the most important aspect of the song. But then you have the lyrics, which is the story. The story is going to keep you there. The story is what's going to keep the listener listening through till the end of the song because the listener can relate to the words that you're saying, to the experiences, the emotions that are interwoven into these lyrics. But the melody is exceedingly important. And at first, I was more of a lyricist where I didn't pay as much attention to the melody because I thought, oh, this will work, I'll do this. But the more I learned about melodic structure, the more I realized how much I could play with it because I could structure different melodies. In music, you have three different melodies. So you've got a conjunct melody, which is where you go up a scale. So it's just da 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 da. And basically, what it means is if you think about it visually, it's you're going up a scale like a ladder and then you're coming down a ladder. You've got a disconjunct melody where you use more intervals. So it would be like da, 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 da. So here you've got your octave leaps, you've got your thirds, your fifths. And if you think of it, it's like taking a jump, a leap up somewhere, or you're jumping off of something, you're going down. And then you've also got the static melody where everything is on the same note. So it's just da, 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 da. And so if you listen to songs and you analyze them, you'll notice that they scatter these different types of melodies throughout the song. Because if you use one melody, one just form, your song is going to be monotone. No one's going to stay there. And especially in a world of where it's so easy to skip to the next song. On Spotify, you listen to it 3 seconds, you're like, nope, not for me, that's done. Nope, not for me, that's done. So it becomes increasingly difficult to catch a listener's attention. And that's why usually in verses, you choose one melodic structure. So say you're going to have a conjunct melody where it's just going to go up and it's going to go down. And it's just going to keep going up and down. Then your chorus, maybe you want to add some leaps and you've got that disconjunct melody where you start from you make an octave leap. Maybe it's a fifth, maybe it's a third, whatever it is, just to add a bit of variation. And so that's what a lot of songwriters, a lot of music producers do just to keep the listener intrigued.
That makes a lot of sense. And of course, too, in addition to the melody, there's harmony and there's rhythm. So,
Yes.
but when we're like, I sometimes work in large offices where there's a lot of people. So when people are quote unquote humming a tune, that's the melody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be fair to say? So
Yes.
so it's the melody. And also too, you bring up a good point about, pulling people in. So sometimes it could be a lyrical hook, sometimes it could be a rhythmic hook, but there's also this desire for humans to have, and this could be poetry, it could be a movie, a scene where there's tension, the increase of tension, and then resolution. And you see that musically too. So when people get drawn in, some of that drawn in is the creation of the tension because you're waiting for the notes to get resolved.
Yes.
And then the note comes in and then, so just like a movie scene where it might get dramatically very intense and then there's resolution. So, and that even goes into the 3-act structure. In writing and in films, which is, the part 2, the second act is always increases the tension, and the third act is the resolution. So it's funny throughout all of these artistic endeavors, even though writing has its own kind of coded language and methodology, poetry has its own structure and methodology. These overarching processes of successful films, poetry, and songs, there are a lot of commonalities among the three. And it sounds like you've spent a lot of time on the process, which I don't think many people do. So did you have musical mentors? Did you read books? Was this more of an intuitive discovery for you?
So for me, I did a lot of research. I did a lot of research on my own. So I learned a lot of music theory. I went into songwriting seminars. I did Zoom calls with a lot of songwriters, and we just collaborated, shared our experiences, shared our knowledge. And so I would definitely recommend that to anybody starting out. Just immerse yourself into the scene, into the music scene, connect with people who might have been working for longer than you have more experience, have that knowledge, and will be able to share that, because someone who's been, writing music for about 5, 10, 15 years is going to be thrilled when someone takes an interest in their music and says, oh, how did you do that? And so starting out, I sent a lot of people emails. I said, hey, can you listen to this? Tell me what you think. Give me some advice. And some of it was, oh, I think you should change this part. I don't like how this fits in. You should revise this. You should edit this. And instead of having this attitude where it's my songs suck, everything is just terrible, think, you know what? I can get better. This is advice. I'm grateful that someone took the time to actually listen to my music and critique it because there's a difference between criticism that is constructive and criticism that is detrimental to your growth and improvement. The constructive criticism, someone who is gives constructive criticism will pay more attention to the details and will pinpoint exactly what needs to be changed. Whereas someone who is saying it just to be offensive or it's detrimental, it will be vague. It will be, oh, I just don't like your mute work. I don't like this. And maybe it's a stylistic choice because that's what art is sometimes. But don't listen to those people who have these vague, open-ended critiques and listen to the people who are like, you know what? At bar four, I think you should change that because that you can apply that. You can say, you know what, that's a good point. I see what they're doing there. I see why they're doing it. And the next time I read a song, the next time I read a poem, I will change that.
You've got the voice memos. One thing I hear a lot of writers talk about is the hassle of taking the voice memos and having to write them back down. So, do you have some electronic transcription method to go from the audio to the page, or do you just kind of have to hit those audio notes, listen to them, and type them through? Because I know that can be sometimes a little rough to get through when you have hundreds or thousands of audio notes.
So for me, I did just listen to them and write them down because I wanted to inspect every line,
Oh,
inspect
okay.
every word that I was writing, and some of it I didn't want to keep. So my voice memos, although I have 1,000 of them, they're only about 10 seconds, 15 seconds long. And it's just because when I'm in the moment, I want to capture the idea and it's not about writing the whole song because my voice memos won't be the entire 3 minutes
Uh,
of a song. It will be about 10-second clip, this 10-second clip, then this 10-second clip, and I'll piece them, puzzle them together if they are within a song because I'll be like, this is a verse, this is a chorus, this is the bridge. And then I'll go back, listen to those and say, you know what? I like this phrase. I don't like this phrase. I like this. I don't like this. I'll write this one down. I won't write this one down. And it's just a long, tedious process of just going back, listening to those and writing it down. But I was happy with myself for writing down notes, physical notes where I had already typed them out because those I could just copy and paste and then edit. So it was a combination of those voice memos and also those notes.
for the book Can't Read Me, it's you almost had to go through two additional processes because let's say some I'm sure some of Can't Read Me was started as voice memos, then it goes to the written page, and then of
Mhm.
course to be published, you have to go into, I would presume, but correct me if I'm wrong, we're using Word for the actual construction of the book itself, or something more specific for writers like Scrivener.
I was actually using Canva. So it's
Canva,
this
okay.
they allow you to create the book format. So I just used the dimensions that KDP Publishing required. So because I'm self-published, and then I just structured it up in Canva. And I loved using Canva because they gave you illustrations that were royalty free that you could include in your page. And I found that these accented the poems that I was writing. And so I would have like a rainbow once I had, an uplifting poem, or I would have maybe a teardrop once this poem was supposed to be, about melancholy, like, sad and just in a depressing state of mind. So I would vary this up. And I believe that the illustrations kept the reader there because everyone likes looking at a pretty picture while they're reading some words. It gives you a visualization aspect of the poetry and it paints those pictures in your mind, and that's what I wanted my readers to see. I also did put in QR codes to some of my songs in my book. So you could read the lyrics on the page of my song. And then if you scan the QR code, you can go listen to the song on Spotify, which is something I haven't seen a lot of authors, writers do. So I just thought it would be something unique, something a bit different.
That's fantastic. And for the people out there that are aspiring writers, can you explain to us what KDP is?
Okay, so KDP Publishing is a self-publishing service through Amazon. And what they allow you to do is they allow you to write a book, upload your manuscript, upload your cover design, and publish it on Amazon's platform. So they take care of the creation process of it. So the actual physical, tangible manufacturing of the book and the shipping to the customers. And it's wonderful because it's made writing so much more accessible to writers. You don't have to go through a publisher, you don't have to go through an agent. You can do it yourself. The only downside to self publishing is the marketing aspect of it, which is you're in charge of getting your book bought because nowadays it's easy to write a book, it's easy to write an album, it's easy to release a single, but it's difficult to get that audience to buy that book, to listen to your songs. And that is where the marketing component comes in and where you have to basically centralize your entire craft on who is it going to appeal to? Who's the audience? How can I target them? Am I going to do email marketing? Am I going to do social media? Am I going to do videos? Am I going to do podcasts? What am I going to do to connect with that audience? And a lot of it comes down to providing people with value and connection. So if you're able to tell a story people are able to relate to, or if you're able to give them some information, some advice, then chances are people will be more inclined to check out your book or your music, whatever it is that you're doing.
And marketing being a really key component. And we discussed that a lot on the previous episodes of the podcast. And what's really funny, and I didn't think to bring this up until just now, so I'm glad you said this. Even though I've done, I think this will be episode 12 when it airs, if my math is right. Mm-hmm. And even though I've done 12 episodes, I've probably talked to 35 potential guests. Some of them ended up on the show. Some people we just couldn't line up our schedule. And then I think in one or two cases there just wasn't the right kind of chemistry. And thankfully they saw that and I haven't heard from them. I still think we could have probably eked out a good episode, but it's just like we talk about musical genre. Not every genre works.
Is a good fit.
Exactly. But what's funny, what's different about what our interaction is when we started emailing each other, you opted me into your email list. Now, what's funny is, I've contacted people from big companies, and some of them have been on or are going to be on. None of them did that, but you did that, and I was like, yeah, she's ambitious. She knows what she's doing. I was like, what am I getting all these emails from her about? And I'm like, I'm opted into her newsletter. So, which is fantastic. So you didn't miss that opportunity to grab the attention. And it's funny because 34 other people that I talked to didn't think about that. And some of these are, big swank offices and places somewhere. So that's fantastic, and I'm glad you brought that up because it prompted me to mention it. So you have to be, especially if you're a self-published author or you're an independent artist, anybody who's not represented, you have to just be promoting until at some point you reach critical mass, and then you have an agent, and then you have people that handle that. But very few people break past that. Now, going back to Amazon and your book, how much of a cut does Amazon take for each book that you sell? What's their take on that?
It depends on the amount of pages because the amount of pages, the hardcover book, because if you're thinking of the physical copy of the book, they take more of a cut because obviously it takes, more money to produce a hardcover copy than a paperback copy. So they do take about, I'd say, like $8, $6 to $8 on physical copies. Sometimes it can be like 10 to 12 depending on the type of book.
Oh, wow.
And so you can choose like a markup. Usually you do about $5, so you take at least $5 in profit. With the KDP publishing, which is the Kindle direct publishing, where you publish on Kindle, they take about a 60% cut. So,
Ooh, ouch,
yes,
ouch. I thought it was 60, but I wasn't sure. I wanted to hear you say it
yes,
because I think it's 60, but that seems too high, which it is too
it
high.
is.
So what are you getting for that 60%? I mean, what are they, other than having access to all of their buyers, what else are they offering?
Well, usually they allow you to opt into some free promotional
I see.
services so you can offer your book for free. A lot of it is just gaining that audience, gaining that attention, because if you don't have readers, then you're not going to make money from your book. So what some authors do is they offer their book for free on Kindle Direct Publishing until they gain that audience, and then they mark it up to sometimes it's like $3. You can sell the most, I'd say about $5 for a Kindle Direct book. From that, you're only making about $1 to $3 off of every copy sold. So you just have to gain, a larger audience, have more purchases because that's just how it's going to add up. Most of the time, musicians do not gain most of the revenue from the streams or from the music itself, but it's more the merchandise,
That's right.
the concerts, the tours, whatever is a subsidiary income. So that and that aids the actual income because if you're thinking back at streams, I think I got 10,000 streams on one of my songs and I got maybe $2.
Oh my gosh. And that changed. I'm going to make some presumptions here, but that changed prior to your generation because in the late 90s when I had the studio, that's when Napster came in. And a lot of people were like, "Oh man, that's great." And what it did, as I'm sure you already know, it trained the American public that, oh, I don't have to pay for music anymore. And
Hmm.
YouTube kind of helped that a lot. There were a lot of parties involved in causing this to happen. And now people don't even see music as something that they need to pay for. And going back to the street musician Robin Spinell, what we talked about is it's a lot more like you've got the 10,000 views and only got $2, whereas it's
Hmm.
more important. If you had 300 hardcore fans, that's way better than getting 100,000 views one time for one video on YouTube. If
Yes.
you have 300 patrons just giving $5, $10 a month or whatever, that can completely change your circumstance. And you could live that dream that everybody wants to be a full-time musician. So
Hmm.
what is, when you think about building that and getting those raving fans, what are some of the processes? Or do you launch and put things up at certain times? I mean, obviously, if you're working with Canva, um, you're savvy about that process. So can you take us through a little bit about the premeditation and the planning that goes through launching and sending out, whether it be the written word or the music?
Yes. So for me, I've got a lot of different facets that I like to go down with my music, my creativity. I've got my writing, I've got my music, and then I've got my podcasting. And those are my three main right now. So the podcasting is more broad for any type of creative out there. My music is for the people who also like my writing. So I'd say there's a shared audience there because most of the people who read my writing, it's the same age demographic, same, it's mainly females because I write through a female perspective. And I believe that more females would be able to resonate with my work than males, although some males, will like different poems because I do have, some poems that maybe other people who've had faced adversity or just been through low times in their life will be able to relate to, and that's mainly anybody. But I do have some poems in there and some songs that I'd say is for a certain type of person. And then those is where that shared audience is, whereas my podcasting, it's mainly for any creative out there. So I do have these different branches when it comes to my art, and I've tried to just categorize it all under my company, Tribes Tune, and then this AKA girl, this pen name, this alias that I have. And it's just so that people pay more attention to the work than they do about the artist because If you look at pop culture today, people will dislike an artist or like an artist based on their political views, who they support, who they don't support, what they wear. And when you look at that as an artist myself, I'm like, but is the art good? Is the art up to par? If you're listening to the song and they've dedicated, 10,000 hours to creating a good product, and you're just not going to disregard all of that because they said something, they made a tweet, they did this, maybe they're left or the right wing, whatever they are, and all of a sudden you're not going to pay attention to the art. And that's why I've really had the art at the focal point of my company and saying, hey, this is the art. If you like it, then come in, you can be on my mailing list, you can follow me on Instagram. You can listen to my podcast episodes. And that's where I want the emphasis to be.
You had a great lead in earlier about your book, Can't Read Me. If you have some sections of that or a section of it you'd like to read to give people a taste of what's on there, I'll give you a moment to get set up for that.
So this is my poem. It's called Mark on the World, and it's all about being kind, spreading kindness, and I'll read it so you guys have more of an understanding of what it's about. So the first verse is, she gave a coin to the loner on the street. He lent a hand to a mother who's in need. You see their the kindness like a shadow in the dark. The best of all don't need limelight to shine. These doors open and close, these winds hollow and snore, but the light brings you back to shore, making a mark on the world, changing the way things work. Making a mark on the world, changing the way things work. She mailed a card to a widow who's in grief. He gave a hug to his brother who wants to leave. You hear their heartbeat like a whisper from afar. The best of all don't need voices to speak. These doors open and close, these winds hollow and snore, but the light brings you back to shore, making a mark on the world, changing the way things work. I want to leave kindness. I want to leave fortune, trying to make a difference. I want to leave kindness. I want to leave fortune, trying to make a difference. These doors open and close, these winds hollow and snore, but the light brings you back to shore, making a mark on the world, changing the way things work.
Thank you very much for that. Now, is that also featured in a song or is that solely in the book?
So that is actually a song. I am working on putting it on my album, which I am hoping to release in about 6 months. So it's going to be featured on there.
Now, will you be able to retroactively go back into KDP and put the QR code in that? So that
Yes, I will.
perfect. No, that's great because I'm thinking like, I've got your
Mhm,
process now. That's fantastic. So what about the taking the book since you're already in KDP and I've been a member of Audible. I've had a few lapses in my membership, but I think I've been a member since 99 or
mhm.
2000. So I was what they call very early adopter of Audible. Prior to that, there was books on tape, which were cassette tapes, if
Yes.
you've ever seen one. And before that was books on album,
Mhm,
so and those are, you can't take those in the car. Album doesn't work very good when you hit a pothole. But so they did have books on tape, which was, a big book might be 12 set of tapes. And the big thing that they've changed in Audible in the past few years is the ability to speed up a book. Now, you wouldn't want to do that for poetry, but if you're
mhm.
listening to a very nuts and bolts, something legalistic or maybe even historical, and you're trying to get
Yes.
part, you can speed it up, which is fantastic. Now, since you have a physical print book that's, I assume, like POD, print on
Mhm.
demand. Amazon just prints it as people order it. You have the ebook that's available through Kindle. But what about an audio version of Can't Read Me? Have you thought about that? Is there a plan in the works for that?
Yes, I was thinking about that, but currently I'm focusing more on my podcasting, more on, writing that album. And I was going to circle back to it in the future and just see if I could get a voice actor to read the book because I know some voice actors and I might send them an email and say, hey, would you be interested in doing this with me? And send a proposal. We go back and forth. I could easily do that in the future. Right now, I haven't had the time to concentrate on that currently, but in the future, of course, it's an option. I'd be willing to go back and do that.
When you were writing Can't Read Me, at what point did you reach out and get some assistance? Was it at the editing or was it at later stages?
I did reach out and get some editing help, so I sent it to some of my friends who are writers, just asked them to review it. And then I also did a lot of ARC reviews even before the book came out. So this is just reaching out to people who might be interested in my genre, romance, poetry books, and I sent them a free copy and I said, "Hey, could you write a review once it's published on Amazon on May 2nd because that was my publication date." And so because what Amazon does is it rates the amount of reviews and ranks your book higher in your category depending on how many reviews you have. So I did reach out and started off with, I believe, about 11 reviews on Goodreads and then some on Amazon. And then I just asked more people to write reviews. If you reach out to about 50 people, chances are only 10 of them will leave
That's
a
right.
review. So, it doesn't look like a lot, but the amount of reach outs you have to do to gain like a small number of reviews is the conversion rates are low. And if you're doing anything in business, anything online, you'll notice that those conversions are quite low just because people need at least 3 touch points in order to connect with the company, with the brand, buy the product. They need to be familiar with it. So if you look at the major companies, like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, you've noticed how much money they spend into advertising, and a lot of it is just brand awareness. And that doesn't convert instantly. So a lot of people think, hey, I pay for ads and all of a sudden I'm a millionaire tomorrow. It will never happen. You need that long term. You need to be consistent with everything you do in order to gain that audience, in order to make sales, in order to get streams, in order to do anything. You need to be consistent. So that's just something you have to focus on and just be adamant about doing.
That's why you can go to the Kalahari Desert and they know what Coca-Cola is, but
Yes.
Coke has been written on everything, pinball machines to
Hmm.
when the Bears were popular. So branding, that's something that a lot of people don't understand. And you use the perfect word for that is consistency. So your messaging, your branding has to be consistent. And of course, sometimes people mature, they move into different,
Hmm.
writers might change genres. Musicians might change genres. They might work in a collaborative environment that's very different from what they've done before. But generally, still overall, there needs to be this consistent message on branding, and that's not as fun for artists to think about. And I know that the artists that I've worked with over the years, some of them are allergic to that more business aspect to it.
Hmm.
But of course, that's why a lot of artists in the past, you hear these horror stories about the record company ripped these people off or whatever, and it's because they weren't interested in learning about that. But clearly, you're interested in the nuts and bolts of it, which is it's going to be very hard for somebody to tell you something that's not true. You're going to know because you've spent the time to educate yourself, and I wish more artists did that. Going back to the book for a moment, you said that you were doing some design in Canva, and Canva had some free images that you could utilize inside of the book, but your cover art was actually done by somebody else. Can you tell me who you hired to do that, the cover art, and how that contact was made and the
Yeah.
process?
Yeah, so I am thrilled just by, the sheer intricacy of my cover art. And what I did to get that covered art was I actually reached out to a digital designer who was on my podcast. He was a graphic designer. He'd worked with artists before. So he did a lot of music videos, a lot of cover arts for album. And I basically reached out and said, hey, would you mind designing this cover art for my book? I'm going to tell you the genre. I sent him reference images. So I went on Pinterest. Pinterest is an amazing platform platform for gaining inspiration. If you ever need a color palettes, you need a reference image, go on Pinterest and start pinning. So I sent him a pin board of everything I wanted my book to look like. And he said, you know what? I can do this. I can do this. I can add this color. I can add this color. And I said, I wanted it to be branded. So I wanted the colors on the cover art to be similar to the colors on my website, on my business cards, on my logo. And that was the purple, the pink, the blue. And so I just sent him those colors. He made something with it. We worked back and forth, and bada boom, we got the cover art.
That's incredible. I've only worked with a handful of artists that had a very strong, we call it left brain tendencies and right brain tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
So the left brain
Yes.
is the stuff that I deal in, the contracts, the promotional, the I get down in the weeds and like to read, policy and understanding the what people consider the boring aspects of it, because I think, there's also beauty in that
Mm-hmm.
too. And
You
if
need
it's,
to know both.
that's right.
You have to be both right and left brained.
And you've invested a lot of time. That's fantastic. Because again, an artist like you that has an interest in both, that's very rare. But the ones that I do know that have both, over the course of their career, they did much better financially. And I know I won't mention any names because I don't want to embarrass them, but I know one
Mm-hmm.
visual artist who's a painter and their work is really good. There
Mm-hmm.
are other artists out there in the same city where they kind of compete. And there are a few artists that have a slight edge on them as far as maybe skill,
Mm-hmm.
but they're so clever in business. I mean, look at one of the most successful artists in the United States, Andy Warhol. Look what I mean, he was a good artist. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
take anything away from him. But his ability to monetize his art is still to this day talked about because he did something, there were a lot of starving artists before him and after him, but the people that worked with him, um, doing the printing, and he would do numbered series. And even Salvador Dali, towards the end of his career, I think possibly influenced by Warhol, started doing print series and runs.
Mm-hmm.
And Picasso kind of even figured that out towards the very end of his life. So there is a real upside to understanding the business. Now, for that, you said that you had talked to some mentors, and as far as the coaches from the artistic side, but what about from the business side? Were you part of any groups there, or did you read business books? Where does that come from?
Yes, so I did both. I was both heavily invested in the art community and heavily invested in the business community. And I decided to combine those two because any successful artists that I've reached out to, I've reached out to accounts on Instagram that have had 700,000 followers, and some of them were in my genre poetry. And I asked them how they did it. And they said, well, once you do something for 10 years, you stay consistent with it and you know everything about the business aspect of it in addition to the art. Like there is limited room for failure. So that's something that I've also taken into account and said, hey, if I have knowledge on both of these aspects, I can combine them in order to monetize my work, in order to be a successful artist. And at the beginning, I did read, plethora of business books. I did, you have the most famous business books, sometimes like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but you have, there's you just search up business books on Google and you'll get a list of 100, 200. And I just went through some of those. Some of them were informative. Some of them weren't applicable to what I was doing. And so it's really just filtering through the information because everyone's going to give you advice. They're going to say, do this, do this. And even when it comes to life, people are going to say, you should go on this career path. You should do this. Everybody wants to give you advice. They want to tell you what they know, share their knowledge. But it's really up to you to decide what works best for you because we are individuals. What works for the average person, what works for someone else may never work for you. And it's understanding how you work, what works best for you, what you need to do, how you're most productive, what inspires you, what you enjoy doing. If you know those things and you know what how you can be more motivated, how you can produce more work, how you can produce more art, and you understand that on more than a surface level, then you're able to combine the advice that other people have given you and implement it in a way that is beneficial to you instead of just, advice that you'll never look at again.
I think we're going to see a lot more of you out there, whether it be your AKA, your anonymous persona, or your real persona. So, for people that are interested in finding out more about your work, both musically and your written work, where can they find you?
You can find me on my website. So that's just www.tribestune.com. You can find me on my Instagram, which is at handle tribestune. You can also find me on Facebook, which is the same thing at handle tribestune. TikTok, I haven't updated just because I need to go back into TikTok and just work my posts, put more posts up. You can find me on Pinterest at Tribestune. And yeah, you just search up Tribestune and I should pop up.
And as far as the podcast, are you still looking for artistic guests to come on?
Yes, so my podcast is called Mass Monologues, and you should be able to find it on my website, on Spotify, all major streaming platforms. And then there's my book, Can't Read Me, so you can check that out as well. No, thank you so much for having me. I love what you do. Thank you for having this platform for creatives to pop on and share their knowledge and to promote themselves. Thank you so much. It's been an amazing experience.
It was my pleasure. I can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you so much.
Thank
Until
you
next
so
time.
much.
Thank you for joining us on the Free Time Mastermind podcast. I'm your host, Robert Gaines, and we appreciate you stopping in and checking out the channel. If you would, please click like, subscribe, hit the notification button, leave a comment, share the video with someone. We've got some fantastic episodes coming up. Also, too, for today's guest, check out the description to find out more about them, and also look at the links that we've posted below that for ways to get connected with us. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.